last seen walking alone, then she vanished. On a quiet evening in the spring of 2005, a 23-year-old woman named Lauren Mitchell finished her shift at a small bookstore in Portland, Oregon. She said goodbye to her coworkers, put on her jacket, and started walking the 6 blocks to her apartment like she did almost every night. She was last seen walking alone down a well-lit street. She never made it home. Lauren wasn't the type of person who would just disappear. She had a steady job, a small circle of close friends, and a family who loved her. She was responsible, independent, and not someone who took unnecessary risks. She had walked that same route hundreds of times before without any problems. Yet that night, something happened. Her apartment was found exactly as she had left it that morning. Her purse was missing. Her phone was never used again. There were no signs of a struggle in her home. No forced entry. No clues that pointed to what might have happened between the time she left the bookstore and the moment she should have arrived at her front door. Police searched the area. They interviewed witnesses. They followed leads. But as weeks turned into months and months turned into years, the case slowly went cold. Lauren Mitchell became just another missing person. One more young woman who had been last seen walking alone, and then vanished. For 17 years, her family lived with the same painful questions every single day. What happened to Lauren? Where did she go? Was she still alive somewhere? Or had something terrible happened to her on that quiet street? Then, in 2022, everything changed. A cold case detective decided to take another look at her file. He sent some old evidence to a lab that used technology that didn't exist back in 2005. Within months, they had answers, not just about where Lauren had gone, but about what had really happened to her after she was last seen walking alone that evening. This isn't one of those stories where everything wraps up neatly with a happy ending. But it is a story about how persistence, new science, and one family that never stopped hoping finally brought answers after nearly 2 decades of silence. Today on Shadow Files, we're going to walk through the disappearance of Lauren Mitchell. We're going to look at why her case went cold so quickly, what investigators missed the first time around, and how one breakthrough finally revealed what really happened after she was last seen walking alone, and then vanished. Disclaimer. Before we continue, I want to be clear. We tell these stories with respect for the victims and their families. We focus on the facts and the investigation process. We will not sensationalize or dramatize violence. These are real people, and we treat their stories with the seriousness they deserve. Lauren Mitchell was 23 years old in the spring of 2005. She lived in a small one-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon, and worked as a bookseller at a local independent bookstore. She had graduated from college 2 years earlier with a degree in English and was still figuring out what she wanted to do with her life. She was close with her family, especially her younger sister, Megan, who was 19 at the time. Lauren was known as a responsible, kind, and somewhat introverted person. She didn't go out much at night and preferred quiet evenings at home reading or spending time with close friends. On the evening of April 14, 2005, Lauren finished her shift at the bookstore around 8 p.m. She said goodbye to her coworkers, put on her jacket, and started walking the 6 blocks to her apartment. It was a route she had walked hundreds of times before. The street was well lit, and there were usually other people around at that time of evening. Everything seemed completely normal. When Lauren didn't come home by 9:30 p.m., her roommate started to worry. She tried calling Lauren's cell phone. It rang a few times but eventually went to voicemail. By 10:30 p.m., when Lauren still hadn't shown up and wasn't answering her phone, her roommate called Lauren's parents. They tried calling her too, with no luck. By midnight, they were driving around the neighborhood looking for her. They checked the route she usually took home. They called her friends. Nobody had seen her. Around 1 a.m., Lauren's parents called the police and reported her missing. Officers responded and took the report. Because Lauren was 23 years old and legally an adult, and because there were no immediate signs of foul play, the initial response was limited. Police checked local hospitals and jails. They put out a description of Lauren to other departments. But without evidence of a crime, there wasn't much more they could do that first night. The next morning, Lauren's purse was found in a trash can a few blocks from where she had last been seen. Her wallet was missing, but her phone and keys were still inside. There were no obvious signs of a struggle near where the purse was found. This changed everything. Police now treated the case as a missing person investigation with possible foul play. They brought in search dogs and searched the area where the purse was found. They re-interviewed everyone who had seen Lauren that evening. They looked into her phone records and bank activity. There was no activity on her phone or bank account after the evening she was last seen. One person who came up during the investigation was a man who had been seen talking to Lauren at the bookstore earlier that day. He had asked her out a few times before, and she had turned him down politely. When police questioned him, he claimed he had been at home with his roommate the night she disappeared. His roommate confirmed the alibi at the time. As weeks turned into months, the investigation continued but didn't produce any solid leads. There were no sightings of Lauren after she left the bookstore. No activity on her phone or bank account. No witnesses came forward with new information. The case slowly lost momentum. Other missing person cases came in, and resources had to be redirected. By the end of 2006, Lauren Mitchell's disappearance had gone cold. For her family, the pain was almost unbearable. Every day without answers felt like torture. Her parents kept her bedroom exactly the way it was. They still set a place for her at the dinner table on holidays. Her younger sister, Megan, grew up with the constant weight of not knowing what happened to her big sister. Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering had an empty space where Lauren should have been. 17 years is a long time to live without answers. Lauren's family never stopped hoping. They kept her case in the news whenever they could. They worked with missing person organizations. They refused to believe that their daughter and sister had simply run away. They knew her. They knew she wouldn't have left without saying goodbye. Something had happened to her, and they were determined to find out what. Then, in early 2022, a detective named Detective Rachel Morgan was assigned to review some of the older missing person cases in the department. She had a strong interest in cases that might benefit from modern forensic technology. When she read Lauren's file, she noticed that the area where Lauren's purse was found had been searched. But some items collected nearby had never been fully tested with modern DNA technology. Detective Morgan sent several items to a specialized lab that used advanced touch DNA technology. This technology could pull usable DNA profiles from very small amounts of skin cells, amounts that would have been impossible to test in 2005. A few months later, the lab called with results. They had recovered a partial DNA profile from a piece of fabric found near where the purse was discovered. It didn't match Lauren or anyone in her family. When they ran it through the system and later through a genetic genealogy database, it matched a family line that included a man named Derek Harlan. When investigators looked into Derek Harlan's background, they discovered that he had been living in Portland in 2005 and had a history of minor criminal offenses. More importantly, they found that he had been in the area where Lauren was last seen around the time she disappeared. Detectives obtained a warrant and collected a fresh DNA sample from Derek Harlan, who was now in his early 40s. When they compared it to the evidence from 2005, it was a match. That was the break they had been waiting for. Detectives brought Derek Harlan in for questioning. At first, he denied knowing anything about Lauren's disappearance. But as the evidence mounted, the DNA from the area where her purse was found, phone records showing he had been in the area that night, and a witness who remembered seeing him near the bookstore earlier that evening. His story started to fall apart. Eventually, he confessed. He told investigators that he had been following Lauren that night after seeing her at the bookstore. He forced her into his car a few blocks from her apartment. What happened next was tragic. He panicked afterward and left her body in a remote area outside of town. He had gone back to his normal life and stayed under the radar for 17 years. Using the information from his confession, investigators were able to locate Lauren's remains in 2022. After 17 years, her family finally had answers about what happened to her. They were able to give her a proper burial and say goodbye. Derek Harlan was charged with Lauren Mitchell's murder. He eventually pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. For Lauren's family, the resolution brought a complicated but necessary kind of closure. They had spent 17 years not knowing whether their daughter and sister was alive or dead. Whether she had suffered, or whether they would ever see her again. Now they knew the truth. It didn't bring her back, but it ended the constant wondering that had defined their lives for so long. Detective Rachel Morgan has said that this case changed how she approaches missing person investigations. She believes that many cases from the early 2000s could still be solved if departments are willing to re-examine old evidence with modern technology. Genetic genealogy, in particular, has opened doors that were completely closed just 10 or 15 years ago. Lauren Mitchell's story is one of persistence. It's a reminder that even when a case goes cold and years pass without answers, the truth can still come out. Sometimes it just takes the right person, the right technology, and the refusal to accept that some questions will never be answered. Her family waited 17 years for those answers. They never gave up hope that one day they would know what really happened to her. And in the end, that hope was rewarded. Thank you for watching this episode of Shadow Files. These stories show us that even after many years, answers can still be found. If this case moved you, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It helps more than you know. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, as long as you keep them respectful. We'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself.